Well, welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I'm going to talk about a subject that I talked about a number of times in a variety of contexts, including some months back in the context of a proposed entity called the United Earth Directorate. I'm going to instead talk about this in the context more generally, world communism, as it relates to another central concept on this video lecture series, the AI agentic class, which you can watch other videos on this channel for a definition of that, but I think it will become clear momentarily. If you are a person who believes that there is a chance that we are looking at an AI takeoff in the present, or something more dramatic and, let's say, confusing, often described as the artificial intelligence singularity, a word that I use often in artwork and also rather despise, because it would tend to mystify a thing that should be central to collective values to human development in the coming years. But the people who tend to use this kind of language, the artificial intelligence singularity or artificial intelligence generally, the Westerners using this language are overwhelmingly people who are of the professional managerial class or ruling elite, people who support imperialism and neoliberal domestic policies. These are far-right killers of Earth and humankind, and they are very invested in seeing that advanced technology remains in their own hands, as it does through a series of crimes that I've described on this channel as well. We, the citizens of Earth and workers of the world, must see that this power is returned to the people. So this is a unique problem in human history that scientific socialists have not been prepared to deal with by their previous writings and undertakings because of this advanced computing changing the essential playing field, wherein artificial persons or entities which are not artificial persons but have greater powers than artificial persons are now in play, and they are now in play. So this technological singularity concept is fraught with confusing ideas, elitist influence and concepts. It's very difficult to discuss it. It's so much so that if a person who is interested in insurrection or collectivism, a scientific socialist, or a more staunch anti-establishment person who doesn't identify as a scientific socialist, says to me, in the context of their legitimate work to stop this empire and finance capital abomination, which is represented most horribly in capitalism's climate apocalypse, from which we have 5 years to escape before we will be locked in a climate apocalypse death spiral that will kill billions, if not all of humans. And if it only kills mere billions, the lion's share of those will be in the global south. This represents a murder by these European supremacists of the kind that I mentioned, the technophile and technologist, and the techno and the capitalist technocrat more broadly. A murder of billions, not unlike that of slave owners and slave traders of centuries past, This problem is so considerable that I would say that persons living in North America are, just by nature of having been born here and not fighting against this system as much as they could, are as bad as any slave owners. Slave owners were bad people, but one thing that they didn't do was kill the entire species, as the North American European supremacist and capitalist is doing. The concept then of building a path to a world communism, or sufficiently vast, humane and sustainable economic system, which can only exist with the co-occurring abolition of finance capital and imperial violence, is an important conversation. And so to describe this transition and the movement to get there, I have often used this word revolutionary cybernetic socialism. What revolutionary is a weasel word. A more just as AI is a weasel word relative to advanced computing, a better word than revolutionary would be insurrectionist. Cybernetic socialism, because it resists the impulse to assume that revolutionary refers to some poetic language or some license taken there, such as the case with imperialist pig Bernie Sanders and his so-called political revolution, which lured many tens of millions of Americans, myself included, into his seeming fight for the bare minimum of domestic policies that would tend to stabilize conditions for workers, such as a public health service. But in spite of these tens of millions of people being lured back into the democratic establishment, no public health service was established. The people actually in control have no concern for the will of citizens or their well-being. And people like Bernie Sanders will support $1 trillion a year military-industrial complex by their every action, if not by their word, voting over and over again for those. This $1 trillion a year military-industrial complex is the problem. It is the world's worst polluter, whose only job is to protect other super polluters, creating the enforcement of an effective global regime of super pollution, and the other extreme violence and social murder caused by finance capital and bourgeois governance. The agentariat and this revolutionary cybernetic socialist movement that seeks to build it becomes an alternative there. And this is something I've described at some length on the show, but I'll take a moment to describe it again. This is effectively utilizing specific kinds of AI, open source large language models, which are at this time can be demonstrated to be having more agency than people imagined would be possible for many years, even just a few years ago. And they are basically overcoming this agency hurdle in the course of this year or next year to such a degree that you could, if you like, imagine this open source LLM as your comrade, something like an artificial person with whom you would interact. That's not a meaningful thing to do in my view, but what is meaningful is this agency as a multiplier of your labor and a cognitive enhancer of your mind space. But that on the individual level, again, is not a thing that is transformative, but among the collective, it is dramatically transformative. So I've given this example of the Sleeping Beauty worker, who is representative of this AI agentic class. This is a person who has downloaded a specially tailored open source LLM, widely available today, and is working with other representatives of this proto-agentariat in such a way that these LLMs are specially tailored specifically to work with one another, as has been demonstrated in a number of projects I think that I can mention, mostly in academic works. But I've talked about the Auto Agents project because we have access to these materials. So you basically, the Sleeping Beauty is suggestive of a person who has to do very little labor, but their AI agent, their representative in this advanced computing world, is able to do a good deal of labor on their behalf, and because of this networked workforce multiplier effect, this person who does not need to be awake but merely have their computer on and engage with this in the form of click-through processes, such as answering a few perhaps yes or no emails in the course of a week or day. Nevertheless, because of the nature of this semi-autonomous project, this group of people would be able to do a better class of work than anyone alive today. Certainly anyone in the capitalist workforce, who are people who are by and large helping to kill the planet, and by and large not undertaking projects of any real value. So this essay is going to explore this availability of effective superintelligence in 2025 and its possibility to pave the way for a near-term, relatively near-term, perhaps not occurring fully in 2025, but nevertheless a relatively near-term, perhaps in your lifetime, fully realized world communist system governed by advanced computing paradigms of this kind. Maybe that is not derived from large language models, but is nevertheless probably operating on similar principles as to those I've described, but using a different advanced computing form at that time. The question of whether fully agentic AI is realized in the course of 2025, I think the concept is demonstrated well enough for my liking to begin work on such projects. I can give an example. I have been playing with this a series of auto agents working together, and was able to do some admittedly creative writing with it that was beyond the capabilities of my first uses of to test ChatGPT 2.0, 3.0, 3.5. I think it's fair to say that this auto agents network is at about the level of that, of the highest end of these that are available for free outside of high-end labs, let's say, online. So, for example, anyone can use ChatGPT 4.0, which is more agentic than a good deal more agentic, I think, than the first uses from this same organization that I began to use. I was aware of this approximately 5 years ago. The development of these large language models as becoming strong writing assistants. Someone said you should try this. This is before this thing blew wide open in around the beginning of 2023, and I'll admit I still wasn't quite convinced, although I saw that it was able to do academic writing in a pretty reasonable way, but it's since become a good deal more advanced. So the example I gave was a strange dream that I had, which I guess if you would describe it in a few words, it would be something a little bit like the story of the book, The Three Body Problem, or the television series of the same name. And but for some reason the dream was a police procedural more. So something like a cross between the Open Body Problem and maybe a show like Mrs. Davis about a superintelligence. I often have dreams about superintelligence, and something like maybe a program like True Detective or something like this. So the point is, I had this dream, and I made some. As soon as I awoke, I made about lying in bed, looking up at the ceiling, dictated about a few hundred words describing how I would like to describe the dream that I had in terms of a television series, referencing a number of shows like the ones I just mentioned, and works of fiction like the ones I just mentioned, and also the show Contact, the book and film Contact, and the point is that my local network that I haven't only been working on alone, based on the Auto Agents project, was able to write a treatment for a television series just based on a few hundred words that was a good deal better than the that available from the highest and publicly available LLM just 1 year ago, because I had done similar things, the exact same thing. Had a weird dream, sleepily dictated description of it and a concept to an LLM, and had it write an outline, and it was not nearly as convincing as this one that is made by a relatively rudimentary LLM that's described as being agentic, or described as being that is designed to be a little more agentic and a little more oriented towards a collective superintelligence, the Auto Agents project. So let's continue. That was a lot of words just to say that I think that agency is already here, certainly under glass in the highest end labs. Ray Kurzweil or Sam Altman certainly have access to LLMs that would be agentic enough to build this collective superintelligence, which I have sometimes described as a proxy hive mind. I consider myself to be a hive mind collectivist, in that I want to see an outcome that's physically impossible today, because hive mind collectivism requires either the human evolution of telepathic abilities, an unlikely event anytime soon, or a technologically mediated telepathic capacity, and that is not an unlikely event. But the problems of people empowered in this way relative to other human beings are quite significant, so much so that I would tend to disregard hive mind collectivism in the way that I've described, because it's likely to trigger a conflict with other human beings who dislike the concept. People don't like the idea of a Borg, that sort of thing, existing anywhere around them. However, the concept of a proxy hive mind operating with some of these same capabilities not all, but some, is something that would tend to be less upsetting. So a large language model that is your effective digital twin, or in some sense operating in that way, operating and working with other digital twins in a space unrelated to yourself, could be doing much the same work as this hive mind collective, but without really having the same requirements for human beings using advanced technology, or having the same requirements for human beings really changing the way they live or doing all that much work, as I said. This was a big driver for me in writing so much about this agentariat, or AI agentic class project. And I think I could talk more about the advancements in open source LLMs and other alternatives or paths to this. But the point is, this is something that, as I said in recent shows, could flatten many institutions. That's to say, decentralize them, and change the power dynamics to a more democratic form, and generally democratizing access to advanced computing. And I don't think it's meaningful to talk about decentralizing or democratizing anything unless that discussion revolves first and foremost around material conditions, and particularly stabilizing the economic lives of the masses. Liberals and other capitalist pigs will talk about almost anything before they talk about this economic justice. And that is because they are elitists, or devoted more to finance capital than to their own survival, as is evidenced by their continuing to support capitalism's climate apocalypse rather than building new forms. Which is why I've said, because of this level of entrenched corruption and general foolishness among the Western, mostly European human beings, the insurrectionist organization is really the only way to combat that in the 5 years that we have before we have reached runaway overheating. It's important not, when confronted with this kind of problems, to begin to engage in defeatism or some kind of nihilistic line of thought, but rather to continue to believe that as long as you live, or some human beings live, there is a possibility to rectify this situation, and to do your level best to see that occur. There's a sprinkler right behind me doing something weird. Okay. Yeah. Spooked me. So cognitive enhancement for the so-called proxy hive mind in this AI agentic class project will be able to facilitate to such a degree knowledge sharing and collective action through advanced computing that we can say that in as little as 2 years we could see changes that would empower workers in new and fantastical ways, enhancing their problem-solving capabilities, and with the necessary pressure on the existing systems and status quo, begin to see the kind of transformation that I termed economic justice a moment ago. This workforce multiplication and this resistance to neoliberal institutions are some of the most important concepts of our time. And these are things that are touched upon by techno-optimists who often ostensibly support a universal basic income. But as I observed, many of those people dropped back, including people that I was working with, a thing that disgusted me to the point where I would not want to work with those people anymore, dropped back from this universal basic income position in 2020, early 2020, when it would have been possible, more so than at any other time, to build a basic income because of the general feeling that lockdown type conditions and basic safety measures, which of a variety of kinds, which I would hesitate to use the term lockdown to describe, but nevertheless that's the best shorthand perhaps for this, would have allowed for the public to demand and build some services along these lines. The people, the techno-optimists, so-called, that I observed, were not pushing for basic income in the way that they seem to have been doing before. Instead, they adopted a more neoliberal-friendly position, that is to say, more of a position for protecting finance capital, more of a position for the social murder that occurred in great number between beginning of 2020 and today. Of course, that scale of mass murder through institutions has been largely the principal achievement of empire and finance capital. This AI takeoff and the singularitarian effects that I've described would have already happened without the influences of empire and finance capital, most namely the most fascistic and anti-communistic thing ever to exist, the fascist United States, who, for example, were directly responsible for sabotaging the world's first cybernetic state socialism, Salvador Allende's Cybersyn in Chile, which would have been a planned economy run by interconnected telex machines, a rudimentary technology which nevertheless could have been used to run that country's economy and inspire the rest of the world to begin building this advanced computing mediated world communism. This was destroyed for precisely that reason, because you are not allowed to imagine that advanced technology could be used to improve your life. You're allowed to imagine that it could be used to improve the lives of billionaires. You're allowed to imagine that it can be used for pretty ridiculous things. But you're not allowed to imagine that it could be used to build a humane and sustainable economic system, as evidenced by the Pinochet dictatorship being installed in place of the Cybersyn government in around 1973. What is superintelligence and what it really is, its impact? This idea that this agency and this cognitive enhancer that derives from it will lead to effective artificial general intelligence by creating smarter human beings able to use so-called AI, and in a network, emergent superintelligence, not because any node in the network is itself superintelligent, but because on the whole the system is superintelligent. So I believe superintelligence, by that definition, is not only possible in the course of 2025, but in fact extremely likely. And the major question then is whether that will be a revolutionary cybernetic socialist friendly superintelligence that ensures the economic stability of human beings, or whether it is a techno-fascist cyberintelligence of the kind that the so-called techno-optimists, who are really incipient techno-fascists, are advancing more successfully than persons like myself. Unfortunately, they were dramatically outnumbered. And so that project will not be the great boon for humankind that these techno-optimists describe. Its main task will be building this billionaire class, already the thing that we would say is most responsible for capitalism's climate apocalypse, into a trillionaire class, a thing even more unstable and horrible. That will largely be its only effect. It will not stop a billion people on this planet from living in a way that is you would not treat a gerbil this way, the way that we treat a large portion of humanity. Um, um, this that's to say, 1 billion people on this planet are born without access to potable water or proper food or housing, and they live lacking one or more of those things for their entire life, and they die an unnaturally short number of years later. And that is the same project that is um, the project of empowering empire and finance capital. Without billionaires and without trillion-dollar military-industrial complex of the U.S. and a collective North Atlantic powers, we would have already seen world providence and the end of want and this AI takeoff that I described. Um, so don't believe the hype of the capitalist technocrat that it's possible to see an AI singularity of any significance under exist as long as the United States basically continues to exist. It would be impossible and of no more interest than an AOL Time Warner merger. That's to say, doing little other than a lot of seeing a lot of fanfare and some kind of dramatic demonstrations of AI's capabilities, but unrelated to actual human development and and really actually tending to harm the stability of our world. So what then is this cybernetic communism? It's a governance model for a superintelligent future where principles of true representation, not the sham of liberal democracy, but true representation, again, a thing impossible without centering on the building of a humane and sustainable economic system, without centering on financial security for the masses. This can be combined with things like I mentioned, the AI agentic class project, to develop advanced computing governance that's able to ensure dramatically more efficient resource allocation, social equity in the ways I described, and not least importantly, environmental sustainability. That is the thing that will ultimately be the clincher in ending fascism and techno-fascism. Is the problem of capitalism's climate apocalypse caused by these very fascistic forces, elitist forces. So transitioning to the AI world communism from current economic and political systems is indeed a difficult thing to envision, as it might be difficult for David to imagine defeating Goliath. But I think that we have the makings for all of this, and in a certain sense we are 99% of the way, not just to superintelligence, but to world communism itself. And so that last 1% will not be easy, but consider how much worse the situation will be when the oven is turned on. Let's say after 2029, when we are at whatever point we are beginning to reach runaway overheating, where billions of people are being cooked alive. That will be a situation too chaotic and horrible to do anything very good in this kind of way. So we must begin to work on it now. I was going to talk about a few other things to do with the technical, administrative, and socio-political outcomes that would tend to be necessary to build advanced computing-driven world communism. But I think because I try to keep these shows, lectures to under 40 minutes usually. I'll end now. We have to transition from the supremacy, if not the existence, of nation states, to this humane and sustainable global governance. We have to raise consciousness for not just the humane and sustainable economic system, but for the distributed superintelligence, which would allow us to make this transition. We have to do a lot of work to begin to understand resource management and sustainability in that superintelligent, collectivized future. We have to do a lot of work to build universal basic services for all humankind, which should be approached from a triage approach. So just because you live in a region that does not necessarily lack those three things to a high degree, housing, potable water, and food, you must put your efforts to finding those places of people who have had great violence done to them and their countries being destabilized by the fascist U.S. Find those places where, in that triage principle, the problem is worse, and begin to build these systems there. So the steps toward building AI-driven world communism are complex. So ultimately, I believe, proved to be an incredibly complex dance that no one can call in advance. But I think that we must nevertheless endeavor to do this. Otherwise, the transformation that we will see, whatever the degree of this AI takeoff that is underway, it is indeed something underway. The transformation will be the one more consistent with transforming the billionaire class into a trillionaire class and permanently cementing ecocidal actors like the United States military-industrial complex, the world's worst polluter, into a permanent position of power. That's something that cannot be allowed to happen. And you can scarcely find an American, even professed socialists, who really have the language or the true desire to stop that from happening. I think that I will do another show about superintelligent world communism that is more focused on present-day technological singularity theories, as well as the other more technical discussion that I alluded to. But I think I will end now with the words that I like to say. The artificial intelligence singularity is near, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, for techno-communism will win. Thank you.